grew up in Temora on a family property out at Trungley Hall with my mum and dad and 5 brothers and sisters. My father arranged for me to see Andrew Thompson, one of the local solicitors who he was quite friendly with. Andrew explained to me what the practice of law and the profession of law was about, and I was subsequently employed as an article clerk, and it all went from there. So in those days there were really only 2 options to do law. One was the Solicitors Mission Board course and the other was the Sydney Law School. For the first 20 years of my life I was focusing on developing my practice and my family. In my 40s I started to develop an interest in outside things to do with the law. I was always very interested in the rule of law. In 1998 I was elected President of the Law Society, and that was the start of a very great and interesting journey for me. I was very privileged to serve in that role. As President of the Law Society, you are in charge of a body that has 2 functions. One is it's a professional association looking after its members, and on the other hand it's a regulatory body. And I was elected as President of the Commonwealth Lawyers Association, I think it was in 2008, or at the end of 2008, and that was a 2-year term. And as a result of that I got to travel extensively throughout the Commonwealth, and that's where I really got to the cutting edge of rule of law issues. I was nominated for services to the law, so it basically is all about the roles I've served in as President of the Law Society, President of the Law Council of Australia, and I think more particularly President of the Commonwealth Lawyers Association. In the area of homosexuality, LGBT rights, etc., and HIV, there was a particular problem that we were aware of in Africa with HIV, and the laws in those countries weren't conducive to people receiving appropriate treatment because of the laws and the fact that people wouldn't come forward seeking treatment. And there was an enormous amount of research that had been done by the United Nations and other bodies about the problems with the laws, but I knew that that would be a very difficult task to get a firm policy on. So I decided at the Hong Kong Commonwealth Law Conference to start a conversation or a discussion. At the Hong Kong Law Conference, Michael Kirby was good enough to give a paper on the laws that governed homosexuality around the Commonwealth, and that paper convinced my counsel at the time to issue a statement seeking to get countries involved in changing the laws. Michael Kirby gave a paper to a very full auditorium, mainly of Africans, who of course were very much opposed to the laws being reformed. A very hostile audience to start with, but in Michael's usual style, he gave a very scholarly address to the people who attended that, and I think it's fair to say that whilst they didn't all agree with his views, they were very respectful of him, and he got a standing ovation at the end. We were aware that there were threats by some of the African countries to come along and then actually walk out. Michael, at the start of his address, in fact, threw his speech on the ground, walked down and stood in the main exit so that people could not leave. And so he started off his speech and they were stuck because they'd have to walk past him. But when he got into it and when they could see that he was actually doing it not in an emotional way but in a very reasoned and calm manner, they all stayed to the end, and as I say, they gave him a standing ovation. And that had a great impact on me and my counsel, and it allowed us to advance the cause for reform of those laws around the Commonwealth.
What I want to ask you is your opinion, your legal opinion, on the changing of the wording of the Marriage Act 1961.
Well, I believe the Parliament can change the wording of the legislation, and I think that's what they were elected to do. I'm happy to make the comment that I think it's very sad that we've had to go down the road that we've gone down, which I think has resulted in, unfortunately, in some instances, of bad behaviour. I think what should have happened was there should have been a conscience vote allowed in the Parliament, and we would have been bound by that decision. That's not happened, so we've gone through, from what I perceive to some extent to be this charade of holding a plebiscite. Personally, I'm in favour of the change. I've grown up, all of my life thinking that people should be treated fairly and equally, and I think that's what it's all about. Well, I've always loved Temora. I grew up here, obviously, and I've always been coming back the whole of my life, and I have my own property out at Springdale these days. My family come up regularly, and we spend quite a lot of time in the district these days. I love Temora.